very intimate images
Right.
were involved, and it gets very complicated.
I'm sorry, I thought I erased those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That explains the phone call you got earlier. Yeah. Inside joke, sorry.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yuck.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 450 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Carden. What's up, Donna?
Oh, this and that. You know how it goes.
Yeah, so today we have a guest with us. I don't know, he's been here so often. Do we call him a guest? I don't know. Anyway.
He's just our friend. I put our friend.
Yeah.
He's just a dude we know.
Yeah. So we have Gary Salman with us again from Black Talon, and he and I have done some shows when Donna's too lazy to show up. When she's out of town. But before we get into talking to Gary about what's going on with a certain hack that some of you may be affected by, we do want to mention one thing.
If you're in the sector, you're probably affected.
Yeah. We just want to mention one thing, and that is the PriceSec boot camp, because it's almost full. So if you're going to get in there, you better be reaching out quickly.
Yeah. We might be able to take you, but give us a holler.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
If you want to know more about that, go to pricesecbootcamp.com, and it's going to be April 9 through 12 in Atlanta.
Be there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Gary will be there.
I'll be there. I loved it last time. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gary's part, he gets to have the fun part, the tabletop exercises, where he assigns people certain aspects of the business, and then everybody points at Donna and goes, I just called Donna with something.
And that's when I say Donna's on vacation.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah. Donna has left the building. What you going to do now? Or what could really happen is, if when there's something like this big, like Change Healthcare, we're going to be talking about, is you could be tied up with other clients. And,
Yeah.
as much as we want to clone you, that just is not there yet.
Yeah. The cloning thing tails off quickly when you realize you got to clone all of me.
We're trying
Every day I run you through AI to try and get it to clone you. It's not working yet, though. We're close. We're close. But yeah.
Yeah. That's when you get the eyeball on top of the head. No.
Oh, yeah. 5 hands. Yeah.
That'll be an interesting one. So let's talk about this Change Healthcare thing, because this is honestly, like, we always talk about this, but here's a perfect example. We know it's going to be a good conversation. The three of us, we haven't talked about it yet, and we're just recording it. And I gathered all of my notes and all of my things, because this thing's huge. Let's just start with how big this thing is, and its long-term impacts are going to be massive, in my opinion. You guys?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So if anybody that doesn't know, Change Healthcare has had a cyber attack, and it's impacted. The longer it takes, the more of the country will be impacted by this. And you've got everything from hospitals who are concerned about making payroll to small providers concerned about making payroll because of this. You've got patients having trouble getting their prescriptions because of this. And that's just putting just a little tip of the spear of what's really going to happen long term with this. So let's first let's go through what we know about the timeline and what we think happened, because I know, Gary, you get some you can read between the lines and often get information we can't talk about, like us, but it helps you read between the lines. So what we do know is February 21st, and I know this. I was in the middle of a meeting when a CISO at a hospital was like, I got to leave. There's a major cyber attack happening in the industry right now. And it was like, everybody's like, who is it? Who is it? So it's Change Healthcare. and they are a huge business. They are part of United Health Group, and the big thing is they process claims for a lot of payers. And they also do transactions for prescriptions. And the number we got was they manage 15 billion claims a year, totaling over $1.5 trillion.
Yeah. You talk about a supply chain attack. Here we are.
I know. And I can't even do the math of 15 billion, 1.5 trillion, how much that is a day and how long this thing's been going on. It's massive. So it's also one of the largest health information exchanges in the country. I didn't even realize that, but that makes sense. And the bottom line is the things I mentioned with the scripts and the claims and the payments, either of you heard of other ones that are immediate impacts? We know the secondary ones about you don't get money, you can't run your business, but are there other impacts you guys have heard of?
From a waterfall effect, I think that's what we're seeing right now, right? You obviously have patients impacted. Right. You have the practices and the medical and dental groups impacted. And then, from a financial perspective, I think that's what a lot of people aren't even talking about. And we can't even really begin to understand the financial impact there, right? We're practices and groups not even making payroll. I mean, how do you go weeks with almost zero cash flow, especially if your group is pretty much 100% claim-based, insurance-based, I should say. So yeah, like there's that. And I also learned, which I thought was fascinating, Department of Defense was impacted by this, right? Because
really?
Change Healthcare processes their prescriptions. So, military bases and posts across the world were struggling to write scripts.
Across the world?
Across the world. Yeah. So that's obviously interesting as well. And then you have obviously the long-term consequences of this. The threat actors are claiming 6 terabytes of data was stolen. Which
it's going back to 6 or 4.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Still terabytes of data.
Right. And what data, right? So we don't understand the consequences there. And then the impact to a lot of the EMR and EHR providers, literally stopping everything to try and figure out how do we get claims flowing from the providers to the carriers. So they had to redirect all of these technical support resources, development resources, pivoting to different clearinghouses to process medical claims, dental claims, prescriptions. So what's the financial impact to those organizations? It's got to be great. And then you think about all these tech support departments that were literally fielding thousands of phone calls per day, doctors yelling and screaming at them that, you broke our claims. They don't, not understanding hey, this is way beyond the EMR and EHR providers. I think when you start adding up all these numbers and the impact, the billions of dollars lost in productivity is probably
just that.
Even underestimating it. So
I don't know that we'll ever fully be able to put a dollar amount on it.
Right.
Because there are areas that waterfall effect that you talked about. That's a great way to call it, because I don't think it's gotten to the bottom of the waterfall yet.
We haven't even touched it. Someone pushed a bucket over in my little dump of 10 gallons and we have 1 billion gallons left to dump.
Yeah.
But probably not that extreme. I get it. A lot of healthcare orgs have pivoted already. So slight exaggeration on my part, but you get the concept.
Still, it's the way we need to look at it though, because there's areas we don't even know. We may never know actually are impacted by this. And the longer it takes. So let's go back to what we know about what happened. Because February 21st, they start shutting things down. Everybody starts claiming it's the ConnectWise thing. Remember? Because David, you and I mentioned that so many of these things we had mentioned in other episodes recently as we're leading up to this. But ConnectWise says they're not it, right?
Right.
That's what they claim, yeah.
Not it.
Yeah, tag me out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Safety word. And then you had AT&T, Donna, right? I mean, we were going crazy.
I know, right?
AT&T, ConnectWise, Screen Connect, you had Change Healthcare all happening within a very short period of time, and it's just like,
Yeah.
what's
they have to be connected, right?
Yeah,
it's just bad timing for ConnectWise for sure.
Yeah,
and I can tell you for sure, I think AT&T has admitted that was a human failure. Somebody rolled something in, an update ding, but somewhere a human did that. Somewhere a human did this.
It's always human related, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I got into this business many years ago, and I was talking to my friend who was running security for a very large university, and he said to me, "It's always a human's fault." And I said, I don't know if I agree with you. Like, there's vulnerabilities. I get the human, like, social and engineering component of cyber attacks, but there's always, there's always vulnerabilities that often the hackers exploit. And he's like, well, who wrote the software? I was like, okay, point well taken. Argument is over now. Yeah.
That's what I always say. At some point, a human made a mistake.
Yep.
Or made a decision to do something that they thought was going to be bad.
Well, AI is going to save us all.
I was literally going to say, a year from now, we're going to have a very different conversation. Human did not cause this one, right?
The AI will be not me. Yeah. David told me. David put it in my memory.
It'll be the Google developers, right? And so.
Yeah. But within 5 days, I thought this was interesting. 5 days into this, the AHA, the Hospital Association, writes an open letter to HHS basically saying, this is bad. It's going to be very, very bad. Y'all need to do something. And I think they put in there that it impacts 1 in every 3 patient records.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they knew 5 days in. And I'm making a note on here in the notes that we're recording this on March 12th. Okay, so it started on February 21st. March 12th, we're recording this. It'll be published on the 22nd. It will be night and day difference between the two. We won't know what's going to happen after this, and it could get worse. Because so far it hasn't stopped getting worse, at least in my opinion. Because you got the 26th was the AHA, the 28th, the MGMA publishes their letter and to HHS, and then let's see, March the 5th, HHS comes out saying we're trying to herd the cats
Right.
and figure out what's going on. And then the 10th, they publish letter to healthcare leaders on cyber attack on Change Healthcare.
Yep, I read that.
So everybody is involved. It is clear. So we know Black Cat. Tell us about Black Cat and what you know about Black Cat. Because first it was like, no, it was nation state. Then Black Cat said, no, we did it. And they're admitting it now. So tell us what you know about Black Cat.
I mean, we've worked with them in the past. They're obviously a highly organized group. They run a ransomware as a service operation. So think of it as like franchisee. And I think the fascinating thing is, if you've read some of the articles that have been published by some pretty legitimate news organizations, they're talking about Black Cat claiming that, they didn't get the payment and, the U.S. government shut them down. And then they kind of quote unquote screwed their affiliate, like the franchisee, out of all that money. Mm-hmm. The franchisee is saying, oh, well, we didn't get a penny, but guess what? We still have the data. What a mess. Could you imagine being the law firms and the executives that are trying to unwrap or unravel this whole thing? What do you even do? I mean, I'm on these calls with small, some of them, thousands of computers impacted by ransomware events. And those cases are super tough. So take an organization like this and imagine what's going on in the background. It seems like they ran off with the money, right? They're like, hey, $22 million, see ya, right? And that's a significant payout that would
Yeah, because those ransomware as a service, the affiliates get a percentage that they pay out to them.
That's right. So
And
they executed the attack using Black Hat's tools, like they also call it ALPV. And yeah, you're right. Like they get a certain percentage, then say for argument's sake, 60%, 40% goes up to the parent company, Black Hat, and it seems like the parent company took it all. But
well, we just talked about that and it may have been the very last episode, the one before, because Black Cat had announced after, the FBI, the UK, multiple law enforcement agencies had shut them down back in like December, end of the year, and had their, they put we have seized it. And then Black Cat puts up another one. We were not seized. They ran their disaster recovery plan and spun up another server, and kept going.
Yeah, Lockbit too, right? FBI, some other government agencies across the world bring them down, and 2 weeks later, like, hey, we're back up.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think the reality is, and this is what I tell everyone, the code can survive. They can take 75% of the organization down. The government can seize a whole bunch of servers, disrupt their operation, get some of these criminals to flip. But it's very much like terrorism, right? It will unfortunately persist. Mm-hmm. So they modify their code a little bit, they rebrand, and we know what happens. We can already predict the playbook for many of these organizations. They'll be back up and running. Right.
Oh, and they'll be using
I'm not belittling what the government and the FBI has done in any way, because that's amazing, but that's just unfortunately how this runs.
Oh, yeah. But that's the answer to everybody going, why can't they stop this?
That's the problem. Yeah, that code persists.
It's the same thing at a micro scale. When I was in law enforcement, you had your street corner thug dealing drugs, and everybody wanted to know why can't you stop the drug trade? And basically, no matter who you arrest or lock up, it just created a void for somebody else to fill, and it doesn't go away. It's just a micro example of what is happening here at a macro level.
So
yeah, except you can't arrest. They're not able to arrest the thug. It's not a new thug. It's the same thugs.
Yeah. So sometimes they do, but most of the time you're right. That they're so, they're so using kind of a security term, segregated, right? They almost create their own network segmentation and spread out sometimes all over the world. And obviously they hide extremely well, using techniques like VPNs and the dark web, right? And obviously Tor, to kind of obfuscate their location. But I think what's going to be really fascinating on this case is, what does the affiliate do? If the affiliate really has the data, are they now in talks again? I don't know the answer to this, right? Are they in talks again with Change? Say, hey, yeah, it's cool. You guys paid $22 million, but we got zero. We have a copy of your data, if that is in fact the case, right?
Well, it's not uncommon for these folks to do that anyway. When you pay, you told us the story about how many times you had to go through one of your cases. You went through like 70 different rounds or some insane number of you paying the ransom, doing the, all the way through. It's not uncommon for them to do it multiple times.
So sometimes, right. I mean, there have been cases that we've worked on where you make a payment, we've all agreed to the terms, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you want that decrypted too? Yeah, sorry, that's another $50,000. And we tried really hard to prevent that from happening through constant communications and agreements in secure text messages, but ultimately they're the criminal. They'll do whatever they want.
That's out of scope.
Yeah, that's out of scope. Yeah. We'll send you a new statement of work for that.
Yeah. There's a new thing. I haven't had a chance to read it all, but apparently one of those marketplaces that sells the data or something, they, in their secure messaging that was supposed to be like going away in their negotiations, they're honest criminals. They kept it instead of deleting it and expiring it. And they have all the information about the negotiations they've done to get people to pay for their data. And they're claiming they're going to turn it into the police. And if you haven't, because think about so many of these laws now requiring you to report these things.
So from a notification perspective, it could be round 2 of this event.
Yeah, and the SEC thing, that one of the groups turned them into the SEC when they didn't. So, that's the thing that I've told people is like, think about this in healthcare. You don't want to tell anybody, and that's what we've gone through always. Well, I don't want to tell everybody I've had this data breach. Get in line. Nobody else wanted to either. And they're like, well, I'm not going to tell them. Well, think of it this way. Before you can even get through the process of working that out, that 60-day time frame that everybody thinks that now nobody's really following consistently at all, is they start notifying HHS for you. But take it a step further, they notify your patients.
Yeah. The triple extortion method, right?
Yeah. And everybody's like, don't say that. They might hear you. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they already thought of it.
Yeah. And we've had, slightly off topic here, but to your point, some of the last cases we've dealt with over the last few months, when negotiations are not going in the direction that the threat actor wants them to go, they will use certain types of phone numbers and start calling the practices. So that front desk person is literally talking to someone from Russia or another country, threatening the practice to pay. And that's just a whole nother problem that a lot of practices and groups don't even think about. So now you have not only kind of the practice being a victim, but you have employees that are being victimized, as part of these events. And it's really hard. And I've always advised the CEOs and executives, like, you got to understand that person that took that phone call may not be okay. Like that's a harsh conversation. And depending on how aggressive that threat actor is, that's something they're not going to forget. So there's the human element of this stuff that we often forget about and just look at it from a compliance and legal and financial perspective. But
yeah. Well, and to know that if they know who you are, which they can find out who you are pretty easily, they can target you and make your life miserable. They can make you go away if they really wanted to and make it even worse.
Yeah.
So, and people understand that. All you have to do is watch a movie, where somebody, and you'll see it now. It's not as easy as the movie makes it out to be or prolific. So real quick though, I want to get back to the claim that Black Cat took the money and run, kind of approach. There was, I think this whole part of it, I tracked it back to some Twitter screenshot of a dark web forum with one of the affiliate who was supposed to get paid, complaining, and included a list. The affiliate supposedly on the forum made a list of the sources of the data they have. And whether it's 6 terabytes or 4 terabytes, it's still a lot of data.
Right.
And it mentions that they have Medicare, TRICARE, Davis Vision, CVS Caremark, HealthNet, MetLife, Teachers Health Trust, and then what they call tens of insurance companies and others.
Yeah.
So we're not talking just a little bit of data that impacts, remember, what was it? Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, 80 million people. I bet this 80 million is not even a dent in this with as broad as it is. You agree, or you guys know different on the data?
I think it depends the type of data, right? If it's
claims,
especially claims data, sure, 6 terabytes of claims data could be huge. But if you look at potentially other sources of data, depending on what's being transmitted, is there any type of imagery data, right? If practices are disputing, if the insurance carrier is disputing claims and the practices and the groups have to provide documentation on it, I get it, CT scans, MRIs, two-dimensional x-rays, those can eat up a lot of space. But yeah, if you're looking at strictly raw patient data, that's coming through as typically text. Yeah, that could be a tremendous amount of information. And then I guess there could be operational data in there. There could be financials, confidential financial information of the company itself change that could have been compromised. Who knows?
Yeah.
Documents about their business operations, things that could potentially, do harm.
Well, I know that you guys have had cases where we'll just say very intimate images
Right.
were involved, and it gets very complicated.
I'm sorry. I thought I erased those.
La, 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 la.
Yeah, that explains the phone call you got earlier. Yeah. Inside joke, sorry.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yuck, yuck. So, with the sheer volume of data, now when you mention that, a whole like segment of their services on this platform had to do with managing denials. So there would be some of that, but for the vast majority, it's going to be claim data is my guess. Just understanding.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, I was going to say, which alone could be very damaging. I mean, you think about we talk about some of these compromised pictures we've seen before. Think about CPT codes, ICD-10 codes, ADA codes, maybe for dental, not as compromising, obviously.
Yeah.
Of any type of diagnosis, backup documentation, sure. I mean, in the wrong hands and that data mined, that could be ugly.
Yeah. I mean, we have so many cases of it now that it's terrifying to understand how much of our data is already out there, much less these kind of cases occurring where, you think it's behind a, closed door. So they have come out, Change Healthcare says that the payment, so they spun up some sort of alternate payment system. HHS is working with other clearinghouses that will help people move. And so the vendors, as you mentioned, are moving without having to pay out the wazoo. And they're not going to let Change Healthcare start finding people or, get out of none of that's going to be allowed. But the loans and all of those kind of things are another piece of it to get the payments for what they are. But then even once you get the payments that they're already due, you haven't now filed claims. And I mean, these claims go in, people don't understand how quick that is. It's quick that you file it. If it's a clean claim, you're going to get paid in a matter of a week from, maybe even sooner, depending on what it is. So now the medical claims part, they said that they are going to begin testing and reestablish connectivity March 18th.
Yeah, so almost a full month, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's testing. That's not letting them in.
Full deployment, right? Look, and then the other thing that we probably don't know is, was encryption at rest in play, right? So could they have taken 6 terabytes or 4 terabytes and some of that data is encrypted to protect it? I don't know the answer to that. So I think there's so many variables here, but it is a good chunk of data. I guess over time we're going to find out. So
touch on the encryption at rest. David and I have to often bring this up because everybody's like, well, it's encrypted on my hard drive, so I don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using it,
it's not encrypted.
It's not encrypted.
Yeah, but
so
you can still have encrypted databases. So that I may have used the wrong phrase, but yeah, the database encryption.
Yeah, but that's a second level that's beyond what most people do.
Yeah. Yeah, like we have certain software that has field level encryption. So you could be, as long as you're not in that field, you can do that. But that's not commonplace yet.
It is not. I agree. Yeah.
And so often we read even in some of these cases where they're like, they need to have this stuff encrypted. And it's like, number one, it probably was encrypted at rest, but it was in use.
That's right. The database was open. Yeah. So authenticated in.
So it really doesn't matter.
Yep.
So in our experience, and we look at, because you've been around the healthcare world on the dental side for decades like us. Oh, I'm sorry, you're a young guy, right?
No, I'm not. 30 years. Got it. 30 years.
Yep. So you're there with me, but we know a small ripple. And I recall back in the day when they were converting to ANSI. You remember that, the new code set standards, and the claims all but shut down because the payers had problems. And, there were some specific payers, like particularly the state of Georgia, the Medicaid payer had to start just randomly giving people money. And I think Change Healthcare is starting to do that as well. Like, last year in January, we gave you X, so we're going to give you that same amount this year.
Right.
And it took years for that to get cleaned up. So that was not a huge ripple like this one seems to be, because it's much more automated now than it was back then. I look at it and I see that we'll be talking about still residuals from this a year or two from now. You see the same thing? Because, I'm still talking about the ANSI one, and it came up in this discussion.
Yeah. I don't know how long it's going to take. I know, speaking to medical groups, dental groups, many of them were able to pivot either individually or through their EMR, EHR systems to other clearinghouses. So some of the folks, for instance, in the dental space were able to process dental claims, but they could not pivot fast enough to do medical. And I understand that those are just coming online, where they experienced an outage of like 5 to 7 days on dental claims. So, that's for certain dental specialties, that's a lot of money, right? That went filed. And then others were doing paper claims and faxing it. Like, we didn't even talk about that. Like, that's a total nightmare, right? The impact of the teams having to print and fax. And I don't know, I haven't used a fax machine in about 7 years, but I guess people still have them. But maybe it's nice to have that, especially the doctors who haven't thrown away their medical journals from the 80s. They're like, that fax machine around, you never know when you're going to need it. See, I told you we needed that fax machine, right? So,
and it does thermal paper.
It does. It's thermal, even better. Oh, what a smell. What a great smell it is, right?
Yeah.
We all know that.
But so, with these methods, though, is, so often that is, you look at it, particularly in a small group, what's your incident response plan? Go to paper.
But their hospitals have gone to paper during cyber events, right? I remember you telling that story.
But then I say, so how are you going to make sure, how many people in your office have ever used paper? How much time did it take to use paper compared to the computer? So you're not going to be able to operate at the same speed. What extra staff do you have planned? And then even if you get it all documented, how are you going to get it back into the system? And if the claims payment capability is down, how are you going to get money flow? And it's like all of those things came into play here.
Yeah.
You have to call all those people that have retired that was on paper records and bring them back in. They're the only ones that know how to do it.
Come in with their walker, right?
Yeah, it's like you remember when they had, I think it was Y2K, they kept calling all the people that knew how to do COBOL and Fortran and brought them in.
Don't bring me back to those days.
It worked. Nothing happened.
That's right.
Because they did the work.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. But when we look at this from the what we should learn, what we should take from it and moving forward do, well, first of all, the criminals have learned that healthcare is definitely a good target. And I don't think the criminals are gonna go, oh gosh darn, we're not gonna do that anymore.
They're talking about it on their forums, right? I mean, look, did you see the IC3 report from 2023?
I had it up for us to review when we were going to record today, and I'm like, no, we got to talk about this.
Yeah, so I won't get into in this podcast, but that was an eye-opener for healthcare, right? Number one.
Yeah.
So that was not number one in years past, if I remember correctly. But Donna, you mentioned something about like an incident response plan. So we had a lot of our large clients with hundreds of clinics around the country, like freaking out. How do we sever our connection to change?
Oh yeah.
Right. And that's something that I think organizations need to figure out how to do. Now, if it's connected to the EMR, EHR platform, those individual healthcare orgs, they're not going to fix that, right? That's got to be severed probably by the EMR vendor. But there are plenty of other solutions out there where there's direct connections, between labs and hospitals, right? And companies that do offshore work, like answer phones, schedule appointments, even do billing. And those often have VPN connections, and those guys get hit, and all of a sudden, like all these great solutions that healthcare orgs need to utilize for efficiency, et cetera, is now potentially at risk because the code, the malicious code, the ransomware, the hackers can move from network to network. So, I mean, we took a ton of phone calls from our larger clients, like in total panic mode. How do we sever all ties to change? And no plans in place. It's like nothing we can do for you. There's nothing you can do. Like your EMR vendor, EHR vendor is going to do it. The only option I can tell you to do is shut your system down, and that's not going to work either. So it was a calculated risk that to keep their systems on, but this is going to become more and more of an issue. I would hope that a lot of healthcare entities had a wake up call. It's an unfortunate wake up call. Like we never want to. We don't want to take this and make it into like I told you so, because I don't believe in that. But I think organizations need to have much better incident response planning and anticipate events like this happening in the future. I mean, to your point, this is going to impact us for a year plus in many ways.
Well, and in getting to that, how are the vendors going? Because we're talking about the providers getting their payment, but where are the vendors going to get paid? That they invested, like you talked about, that they had to pivot and invest all of this money. Where are they going to make that up? There's no plan for that.
It's written off as a business loss. I mean, I don't know who's going to pay for other lawsuits, but
yeah. And all the lawsuits are spinning up big time.
Yep.
Those are already happening. We know insurance premiums are going to go up because of how much this is costing. And we absolutely have to do more questions in vendor vetting and managing the supply chain. 100%.
And I think you've identified one of the biggest concerns that I have, this third party vetting.
Yeah.
I had a really, and this I think is related, but at a smaller scale, but relative. We had a healthcare group call us and they're like, hey, we're going to start offshoring all of our phone calls for appointment scheduling, follow-ups, billing, right? All of that's going to get offshored and we're going to take that out of our practice. I said, okay. So I'm talking to the executive, the CEO of this healthcare org, and she's like, oh, but they're HIPAA compliant. But she's like, but I've listened to what you've told me and I know to be concerned. I said, okay, no problem. I said, let's get their executive team from this company on the phone. So we get them on the phone and immediately it's HIPAA compliant. We're totally HIPAA compliant. I'm like, okay, that's great. Let me understand what that means. How are you HIPAA compliant? Well, we've set up an RDP server. So we have a HIPAA compliant RDP server. So can't make this stuff up, right? And I know I'm slightly off track here, but this is
no.
Right. So I said,
go.
So I said, well, who's accessing that RDP server? Which I said right there is a concern for me. That those 3-letter words, like literally,
yeah.
My stomach turns and I throw up inside a little bit. But so they're like, oh, well, we have a bunch of workers down in Costa Rica. I'm like, okay, well, are they corporate owned laptops? Like you guys are providing all the laptops to these people. Well, that's on the business plan for the end of 2024. So I said, so they're using personal devices? Yeah, but you got to understand, we control everything because they just remote access into our server. And I said, okay, what if a hacker gets a screen sharing app on that laptop and they use the laptop to access your RDP server? It's just crickets. And I was like, look, that's how they're getting into this system, and they had nothing to say. I said, okay, so you're HIPAA compliant. When did you do your cybersecurity awareness training? Oh, well, we're still kind of in startup mode and, we're going to get to that in a few months. But, our IT department kind of sends out little notices warning people about clicking on links. I said, okay. I said, that's not really cybersecurity awareness training. I went around and around and around. And at the end, the CEO is like, so basically what I'm hearing is you claim to be HIPAA compliant, but you have done nothing whatsoever to actually be HIPAA compliant. And they wouldn't move forward with the organization, But this is a systemic. I mean, you guys know this just as well or better than I do. It's a systemic problem in this industry, right? In the health.
Yeah, and it's not just the offshoring.
Yeah,
it could be somebody down the street.
Absolutely, all these consultants that aren't doing the right thing, right? All these folks that are doing billing and consulting. It's definitely an issue. And then you have folks that are actually doing a really strong job, and they understand the risk and the ramifications if their environment is hit, and look, for these companies that aren't doing the right thing, the second that practice that they're doing this consulting for, they have a cyber event, guess who's getting blamed?
Yeah.
Because I've seen it firsthand. Yeah. It was like, it can't be our network that was compromised. It has to be your network. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But yeah, look, I mean, you guys talk about this all the time, but this whole concept of throwing around this HIPAA compliance, and I'm not even sure what
There's
HIPAA
no such thing. The
is.
minute somebody tells us this, we don't believe them.
Exactly. It's like the truth test, Talk on this stick, and if it turns positive, you're a liar. HIPAA compliance. Liar.
Or my favorite thing to say to them sometimes is go, well, you don't get to tell me you're HIPAA compliant. I get to decide whether or not I think your cybersecurity and privacy program meets the HIPAA guidelines.
Right.
You don't tell me. I get to decide.
Yeah.
And and then it was like, brr.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened. But I think this is very telling. I know this is a story I told, obviously a true story, but this is where organizations are going to be forced to go as a result of this breach. People are going to wake up and say, all right, I don't think we've done a good job at vetting our third parties. They have all these.
But it took you a single conversation and about 5 questions to know.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we need to start, is to say, I'm not even going to go down this path unless you can answer these, 4 or 5 questions so that I can know you're doing this. I just had a conversation with a doctor who was, let's say, angry that because I hire a cybersecurity firm and an IT provider, and why is it that I have to worry about I will get hit? And don't worry. They're offshoring a RCM thing, but they say they're HIPAA compliant, so I don't worry about it. It's their problem. No, it's your patient's problem.
Yeah.
And that's what it all comes back to. This is impacting patient care, patient safety, bottom line, no doubt about it.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Donna, but during an OCR investigation, they're going to ask what you did to vet that third party. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna. Well, if you got a contract in place, that's step 1.
Right.
But step 2 is, if you're not paying attention to your vendors, you're not paying attention to other things either.
Fair enough.
For most cases. So I see this. We just went through the HSCC 5-year strategic plan, taking healthcare from critical condition to stable condition. It was released the 28th of February. I mean, it was already done, saying we're in critical condition and we need to get stabilized. And here are the 10 suggestions for us, and we're moving forward with this. And you've got that, plus the health sector CPGs that just came out. All of these things that, okay, we're looking at making this harder and saying you're mandated to do these, but that looked like it was going to be, the end of the year. I see that stuff picking up pace. Number 1. Number 2, all the vendors who complain about being vetted, that's got to stop.
Absolutely.
You got to walk in the door going, don't just trust me, I'm HIPAA compliant. Show me
I have
that
a
you are
seal,
doing
Donna.
the work.
I have a seal.
I have a seal. Look on my website. It says I'm HIPAA compliant. Come on, guys.
That's right. That's all I need.
Yeah.
I had ChatGPT create a seal for me.
That's a good one. We'll have to do that.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to push the leaders in the sector, the organization leaders, have to change their attitude in order for, and that was a key piece of the plan, is that it has to come from leadership down. They've got to change their attitude that this is a cost thing, and you've got to roll in patient care and patient safety in your cybersecurity decisions.
It's an attitude. It's from the vendor side. Also, it's arrogance. I hate to say that, but it's 100.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy because I see it all the time. Like, oh, we're doing everything right. Like, I don't know why you're asking us these questions.
I know.
But it's this I call it the broken mindset, right? Where they have drank their Kool-Aid, right? And a lot of times it comes, from higher up down to like the sales folks. Like,
again,
tell everyone we're HIPAA compliant. We're in AWS. We're in Azure. We got Microsoft, Amazon doing all of our security. We have a SOC 2. Like, the Kool-Aid is just like coming down the throat in gallons, and it's being spit back out. And so I think the point we're trying to make here, people are buying it, unfortunately, because they don't know what questions. Not everyone has a Donna, and a David, right, to ask these types of questions.
Or a Gary.
Yeah. All right. I don't like to talk about myself. I'll take it. But look, I think that's
you're right.
Yeah.
I had a sales guy giving me the spiel about some new product that of a joint client, and he goes, and it happens in our data center, so it's totally secure. You don't have to worry about it. I said, stop, I'm out.
Exactly.
I'm done. If that's what you're going to tell me, I'm done. Yeah. So, that's getting the vendors, the 5-year plan, all of these things. We're definitely going to go down this path much quicker with a lot more pressure. And I would not even blink about the ability for HHS to be able to make the arguments they've been trying to make of, you've got to give us funding to help the sector. You've got to give us enforcement capabilities that we don't have today to make sure people are doing the things they need to do to protect patients. Because patients are going to stop. I said this probably 8 or 9 years ago when we were first starting this. I'm concerned that patients will no longer trust that they can tell you the truth.
Interesting.
All right. Well, I know we have a hard stop. So thanks, Gary, for jumping on with us and having this conversation. As always, it's so entertaining and yet informative.
And scary. You always add a story I hadn't heard yet.
Yeah, I gotta add new stories. They'll just be boring then, right?
Yeah.
I know, right? We love it, though.
All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Be sure to catch us again next week. And remember, for Donna and myself, and Gary as well, that HIPAA's not about compliance. It's about patient care.
Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right. Protect your patients day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.